They were coaches, teachers, religious leaders, philanthropists, people everyone trusted, people everyone loved. But behind the smiles and the good deeds, they were predators hiding in plain sight. And the communities that worshipped them never saw it coming, until it was too late. This is part 2 of our series, and today, we're going to show you exactly what to look for, so it never happens in your community. Pay close attention, because what you learn in the next few minutes could save a child's life. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. After the story of Miss Eleanor spread beyond Riverside, something unexpected happened. Communities across the country started reaching out to Marcus, asking him to speak at town halls, schools, and community centers. They wanted to know one thing: how do we make sure this never happens here? How do we protect our children from people we trust? Marcus realized that Miss Eleanor wasn't unique. She was just one example of a pattern that exists everywhere, hiding behind respectability, wealth, and carefully crafted reputations. And so he made it his life's mission to teach people the warning signs, the red flags that everyone in Riverside had missed or ignored for decades. What he discovered through research and conversations with experts was chilling. Predators follow remarkably similar patterns. They use the same tactics, the same manipulation techniques, the same careful grooming processes. And once you know what to look for, the signs become impossible to ignore. The first thing Marcus learned from child safety experts was this: predators don't look like monsters. They look like the most helpful, generous, trustworthy people in your community. Research shows they deliberately position themselves in roles that give them access to children and vulnerable people. They become coaches, teachers, youth pastors, mentors, counselors, volunteers, tutors, or philanthropists like Miss Eleanor. They work incredibly hard to build what experts call a protective reputation. They donate generously to causes everyone supports. They volunteer their time enthusiastically. They attend every community event with a smile. They make themselves seem indispensable, so helpful that questioning them feels like betraying the entire community. One expert told Marcus something that made his blood run cold. She said that in study after study of convicted abusers, researchers found that these individuals specifically chose their careers and volunteer positions based on access to potential victims. It wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. They weren't good people who happened to work with children. They were predators who deliberately put themselves in positions of power over children. Think about that for a moment. The coach who volunteers every weekend. The teacher who stays late to help struggling students. The youth pastor who takes kids on special trips. The wealthy donor who funds scholarships and mentors young people personally. None of these activities are bad by themselves. In fact, most people who do these things are genuinely good and have pure intentions. But predators hide among them, using the exact same behaviors to gain trust and access. So how do you tell the difference? That's what Marcus set out to teach people. The first major warning sign experts identified is what they call boundary violations. Predators test boundaries constantly, gradually, almost imperceptibly. They start small to see what they can get away with. According to child safety researchers, this is one of the most reliable early indicators. It begins with physical contact that seems innocent at first. A hand on the shoulder that lingers slightly too long. Playful wrestling or tickling that happens repeatedly. Hugs that feel uncomfortable but are explained away as just being affectionate or friendly. Sitting too close when there's plenty of space elsewhere. Finding excuses for physical contact during normal activities. The key word here is pattern. One hug isn't a warning sign. But constant physical contact, especially when it makes the child visibly uncomfortable, should raise questions. Experts say to watch carefully for adults who seem to need physical contact with children more than the children need it from them. Predators also violate privacy boundaries in calculated ways. They might walk in on children changing clothes and act like it was an innocent accident, but it happens repeatedly. They might insist on being alone with the child in situations where it's not necessary, like offering to drive them home when parents are available, or suggesting private tutoring sessions when group settings would work just as well. They find reasons to be in bathrooms, bedrooms, or changing areas when children are there. Marcus learned that one of the biggest red flags is when an adult consistently creates situations to be alone with a specific child or group of children. There should always be a legitimate reason for one-on-one time between adults and children who aren't their own. If someone is constantly engineering private time, especially if they seem to prefer it over group activities, that's a significant warning sign. Research also shows that predators violate emotional boundaries by encouraging children to keep secrets from their parents. They might say things like, "Don't tell your mom about this, she'll get jealous of our special friendship." Or, "Your parents won't understand what we have, this is just between us." Or, "Let's keep this surprise just for us." They create a sense of special connection that excludes parents and other protective adults. They position themselves as the only person who truly understands the child. Any adult who encourages a child to hide things from their parents, even seemingly innocent things, is crossing a dangerous line. Parents should be immediately concerned if their child becomes secretive about time spent with a particular adult, or if that adult discourages parental involvement in activities. Another major category of warning signs involves what experts call grooming behaviors. Grooming is the process predators use to prepare a child for abuse while simultaneously building trust with the family and community to protect themselves from suspicion. The process is deliberate, methodical, and devastatingly effective. Dr. Elizabeth Jeglick, one of the nation's leading researchers on grooming, identified over 40 specific grooming behaviors in her studies. Marcus studied her work carefully and realized that Miss Eleanor had used nearly all of them. Grooming typically starts with targeting. Predators select children who seem vulnerable in some way. Maybe the child lacks adequate supervision at home. Maybe their parents are struggling financially or dealing with addiction. Maybe the child seems lonely, isolated, or desperate for attention and validation. Maybe they have low self-esteem or have experienced previous trauma. Predators watch children carefully, looking for these vulnerabilities, and then they move in to fill the need. This is exactly what Miss Eleanor did in Riverside. She identified families struggling financially and positioned herself as their savior. Once they've selected a target, predators begin building trust, not just with the child, but with the entire family and community. They become incredibly helpful and generous. They offer to babysit, give rides, pay for things, provide opportunities the family couldn't access otherwise. They show special interest in the child's hobbies, dreams, and problems. They remember details that make the child feel truly seen and valued. Parents often feel grateful, even relieved, that someone successful and respected is taking such interest in their child. They see it as mentorship, as opportunity, as blessing. They don't realize it's manipulation. The predator is deliberately making themselves indispensable so that questioning them later becomes almost impossible. Marcus tells parents in his talks, "If someone seems too good to be true, if their generosity feels overwhelming, if they're investing unusual amounts of time and resources in your child, don't just feel grateful. Ask yourself why. What are they getting from this relationship?" As trust deepens, predators begin desensitization. This is the stage where they start breaking down the child's natural resistance to sexual content and contact. They might make inappropriate jokes, and watch how the child reacts. If the child laughs or doesn't object, the predator sees that as permission to escalate. They might show the child sexual content, like pornography, and frame it as education or something normal that everyone does. They might talk about sexual topics in ways that make them seem casual and unremarkable. They normalize things that should make a child uncomfortable. Physical desensitization happens gradually too. What starts as a pat on the back becomes a longer hug. The hug becomes a massage. The massage includes touching areas that are inappropriate. Each step is small enough that the child often doesn't recognize where the line was crossed. By the time actual abuse begins, the child has been so thoroughly conditioned that they may not even realize what's happening is wrong, or they feel complicit because they didn't stop the earlier steps. One survivor Marcus spoke with described it perfectly. She said, "He spent 2 years making me feel special before he ever touched me inappropriately. By the time he did, I was so grateful to him, so dependent on him, that I didn't know how to say no. I felt like I owed him." And when it happened, he acted like it was normal, like it was just another way of showing love. I was 12 years old, and I didn't know any better. Experts say that parents should be concerned if an adult is having conversations with their child about sexual topics, showing them sexual images or videos, or making comments about the child's developing body. Even if it's framed as education or humor, it's inappropriate and serves a grooming purpose. Children should learn about sexuality from their parents, or trained educators in age-appropriate settings, not from adults who want private access to them. Another critical warning sign is isolation. Predators work systematically to separate children from their support systems. They might criticize the child's friends, suggesting they're bad influences. They might create tension between the child and their parents by implying the parents don't understand them or don't appreciate their potential. They might schedule activities that conflict with family time, slowly reducing the child's connection to protective relationships. They encourage dependency on them specifically, and them alone. If your child is spending increasing amounts of time with one particular adult, and that adult seems to discourage your involvement, or your child's connection to other relationships, that's a major red flag. Healthy mentors encourage children to maintain strong family bonds and diverse friendships. Predators try to become the center of the child's world because it makes the child easier to control and less likely to tell anyone about abuse. Marcus emphasizes to parents that isolation can be subtle. It might look like special opportunities that just happen to take the child away from family regularly. It might sound like, "Your parents are too busy to take you to this event, but I can." Or, "You don't need to tell your mom about our conversations, she has enough to worry about." Any adult who seems to be creating distance between you and your child should be questioned immediately, no matter how respected they are in the community. Researchers have also identified warning signs in how predators interact with families. They often work hard to groom parents and caregivers, not just children. They make themselves seem trustworthy by being exceptionally helpful, respectful, and generous to the whole family. They might offer to help with household repairs, provide financial assistance during hard times, give expensive gifts, or create opportunities for the whole family. This serves multiple purposes for the predator. First, it makes parents trust them completely. Second, it creates a sense of debt, an obligation that makes it harder for the family to question the predator's behavior later. Third, it gives them more access to the child by making their presence in the family's life seem natural and welcome. Miss Eleanor perfected this strategy. She didn't just help the boys in Riverside. She helped their entire families, which made her seem beyond suspicion. When something feels off, parents often silence their own concerns because they feel they owe the person too much to question them. One warning sign experts point to is excessive gift giving, especially gifts that are given privately to the child without the parent's knowledge. Predators use gifts to create emotional bonds, to make children feel special and obligated. If an adult is regularly giving your child expensive presents, electronic devices, money, or special privileges without your involvement, you should be concerned. Appropriate mentors and helpers include parents in these decisions. Predators deliberately exclude parents to create private bonds. Electronic devices are particularly concerning because they provide direct, private communication channels between the predator and child that parents can't easily monitor. Researchers found that predators often give children phones, tablets, or computers specifically so they can communicate in secret. If someone gives your child a device and suggests they don't need to tell you about it, or if they set up private social media accounts or messaging apps for your child, that's extremely concerning behavior. Another pattern experts identified is what they call testing and escalation. Predators constantly test to see what they can get away with. They might make a slightly inappropriate comment and watch the child's reaction. If the child doesn't object or tell anyone, the predator escalates. They might touch the child's arm and see if they pull away. If they don't, the predator moves to more intimate touching. They're always calibrating, always pushing boundaries just a little bit further, always checking whether the child will keep secrets. This is why early intervention is so critical. The earlier inappropriate behavior is identified and stopped, the less likely it is to escalate to serious abuse. But if warning signs are ignored or explained away, predators interpret that as permission to continue and intensify their behavior. Marcus tells a powerful story in his presentations about a youth sports coach in another community who was eventually convicted of abusing multiple children over 15 years. During the investigation, parents came forward and said they had noticed warning signs early on. The coach always wanted to be alone with certain kids. He gave them special attention and expensive gifts. He showered with them after practice when other coaches didn't. He took them on private trips. He made sexual jokes around them. But each parent thought they were the only one who noticed. Each one explained it away, telling themselves the coach was just really dedicated or a bit awkward. No one spoke up because he was beloved in the community, and they didn't want to seem ungrateful or suspicious. When the truth came out, those same parents were devastated. They realized that if even one of them had reported their concerns early, multiple children could have been protected. That's the power and the tragedy of community silence. Predators count on it. They count on people explaining away red flags. They count on gratitude and respect silencing suspicion. They count on their reputation protecting them even when their behavior should raise alarms. Think about how you would feel if you were a parent in that situation. You noticed something that made you uncomfortable, but you convinced yourself you were overreacting. You didn't want to ruin someone's reputation based on a feeling. You didn't want to seem paranoid or ungrateful. And then you found out that your silence allowed the abuse to continue, that your child or someone else's child was hurt because you didn't speak up. How would you live with that? This is why Marcus is so passionate about teaching these warning signs. He tells parents, "Your job is not to prove someone is a predator before you act. Your job is to protect your child. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Remove your child from the situation. You can apologize later if you were wrong, but you can never undo the harm if you were right and did nothing." Now let's talk about some specific patterns that appeared in multiple real cases that Marcus studied. One particularly disturbing pattern involves what researchers call the too good to be true helper. This is someone who seems extraordinarily dedicated to helping your family or your child, to the point where it feels almost unnatural. They're always available. They always offer to help. They never seem to have boundaries or their own life outside of helping you. While many people are genuinely generous, predators take it to an extreme that should raise questions. Why does this person have so much time for my child? Why are they so eager to be alone with children? What are they getting from these relationships? In healthy mentoring relationships, there are natural boundaries. Good mentors have their own families, their own lives, their own commitments. They help when asked, but they don't insert themselves into every aspect of a child's life. They encourage the child's independence and family connections. They're transparent about their interactions and welcome parental involvement. Predators, by contrast, seem to need the relationship more than the child does. They create dependency rather than independence. They discourage parental involvement and transparency. They make themselves seem indispensable and irreplaceable. Another pattern Marcus identified is what he calls special treatment as a control mechanism. Predators often single out specific children for special privileges, opportunities, or attention. On the surface, this looks like favoritism or recognizing exceptional potential. But the real purpose is to create obligation and control. When a child receives special treatment, they feel grateful and indebted. They don't want to lose those privileges by questioning the adult's behavior or telling anyone about things that feel wrong. The special treatment becomes leverage the predator uses to maintain power over the child. Miss Eleanor used this tactic perfectly in Riverside. The boys she chose received better opportunities than others. They got jobs, scholarships, money, praise, and access that other young people didn't get. That made them feel lucky, chosen, special. And it made it almost impossible for them to speak up when her behavior crossed lines, because speaking up meant losing everything she provided. Parents should be cautious if their child is receiving dramatically different treatment from an adult compared to other children in the same program or setting. Why is this adult so focused on your specific child? What makes your child different? Sometimes there are legitimate reasons, like exceptional talent or need. But sometimes the reason is that your child fits the predator's preferences or vulnerabilities. It's worth asking questions and staying involved rather than just feeling grateful. Experts also warn about what they call Boundary testing through inappropriate conversations. Predators often test children's boundaries by bringing up sexual topics, making sexual jokes, or asking personal questions about the child's body or romantic experiences. They frame these conversations as casual, educational, or humorous. But the real purpose is to gauge the child's comfort level with sexual content and to normalize sexual discussions between them. If these conversations don't result in objections or disclosure to parents, the predator knows they can escalate to sexual content and behavior. If your child mentions that an adult is talking to them about sexual topics, asking about their romantic life, making comments about their physical development, or sharing sexual jokes or content, that is completely inappropriate and should be addressed immediately. No trusted adult needs to have those conversations with someone else's child in private settings. One survivor Marcus interviewed described how her abuser started by making jokes about sex around her when she was 13. When she laughed awkwardly, not knowing how else to respond, he interpreted that as interest and permission. The jokes became more explicit. Then he started asking her questions about boys and dating. Then he started telling her about his own sexual experiences. By the time he showed her pornography and eventually assaulted her, she had been so desensitized that she didn't recognize it as abuse until years later. She thought it was something she had somehow invited or agreed to because she hadn't objected to the earlier steps. That's exactly what grooming does. It creates confusion and manufactured consent. It makes children feel responsible for abuse that was carefully orchestrated by adults who knew better. Another major warning sign involves adults who have an unusual interest in a child's emotional life and position themselves as the only person who truly understands them. Predators often tell children things like, "No one else gets you like I do," or, "Your parents don't understand you, but I do," or, "You can tell me anything, I won't judge you like other adults would." This creates a sense of special connection and emotional intimacy that separates the child from other protective relationships. It makes the child feel that the predator is uniquely important in their life. Healthy adults who work with children encourage them to maintain strong bonds with parents and other trusted adults. They don't position themselves as superior to or separate from the child's family. They don't create an us against them mentality. They work collaboratively with parents and other adults in the child's life. If someone seems to be creating emotional distance between you and your child, or encouraging your child to see them as more understanding or trustworthy than you are, that's a warning sign of manipulation. Your child's primary emotional bonds should be with family and age-appropriate peers, not with adults who are inserting themselves into that space inappropriately. Marcus also teaches parents about the warning signs in children's behavior that might indicate grooming or abuse is occurring. These signs don't prove abuse, but they should prompt gentle conversations and careful attention. Some behavioral warning signs include sudden changes in mood or personality, becoming withdrawn from family and friends, showing anxiety or fear about specific people or places, becoming secretive about phone use or online activity, receiving unexplained gifts or money, having new possessions they can't explain, showing knowledge of sexual topics that seems inappropriate for their age, demonstrating sexualized behavior that's unusual, declining academic performance, sleep disturbances or nightmares, and reluctance to go to activities they previously enjoyed. If your child demonstrates several of these behaviors, especially in connection with time spent with a specific adult, it's worth having gentle conversations to understand what's happening. Don't interrogate or accuse, but create safe opportunities for your child to share if something is wrong. Let them know they can tell you anything and you won't be angry with them, no matter what. Many children who are being groomed or abused don't tell because they fear they'll get in trouble, that they won't be believed, that they'll lose opportunities or relationships, or that terrible things will happen if they break secrecy. Parents need to consistently communicate that their child's safety is more important than any relationship, opportunity, or reputation. Now let's talk about what researchers have learned about institutional failures that enable predators to operate for years or decades. This is crucial because individual vigilance isn't enough. Communities and organizations need systemic protections. Marcus studied cases involving churches, schools, sports organizations, and youth programs where abuse occurred over extended periods. He found common institutional failures in nearly all of them. First, institutions often prioritized reputation over child safety. When concerning behavior was reported, leaders worried more about public perception and potential lawsuits than about protecting children. They handled complaints quietly, internally, without transparency or external accountability. They moved problem individuals to new positions or locations rather than removing them or reporting to authorities. This happened extensively in cases involving religious institutions, where multiple clergy members were moved from parish to parish after abuse allegations, giving them access to new victims in communities that had no knowledge of their history. It happened in schools where teachers with concerning behavior were allowed to resign quietly, and then hired at new schools without disclosure of the problems. It happened in sports organizations where coaches were shifted between teams or regions after complaints. The institutions protected themselves rather than children, and that institutional protection enabled predators to continue for years. Second, many institutions had inadequate screening and oversight procedures. They didn't conduct thorough background checks. They didn't have clear policies about one-on-one contact between adults and children. They didn't train staff and volunteers to recognize warning signs. They didn't create reporting mechanisms that encouraged people to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Research shows that predators specifically seek out organizations with weak oversight because it gives them freedom to operate. Organizations with strong policies and active monitoring are less attractive to them. So implementing robust screening, training, policies, and oversight doesn't just catch predators after the fact, it actually prevents them from infiltrating the organization in the first place. Third, institutions often failed to believe victims or take their reports seriously, especially when the accused person was respected and valuable to the organization. When children or families reported concerning behavior, they were often met with skepticism, told they must have misunderstood, pressured to stay quiet for the good of the community, or made to feel like troublemakers. This response is devastating to victims and sends a clear message to other potential victims that speaking up won't help. It also sends a message to predators that the institution will protect them. Organizations must create cultures where reports are taken seriously, investigated properly, and responded to with priority given to child safety rather than institutional reputation. Fourth, many institutions had cultures that discouraged questioning authority figures. In religious settings, there was often a sense that spiritual leaders were beyond reproach. In sports settings, successful coaches were treated as untouchable. In schools, beloved teachers were defended fiercely. These cultures made it difficult for anyone to raise concerns about people in positions of authority. Predators understood and exploited this dynamic. They knew that their status protected them. They deliberately built strong reputations and relationships that made questioning them feel like betrayal. Healthy organizations need cultures where no one is above accountability, where concerns about anyone can be raised without fear, and where status and past contributions don't grant immunity from appropriate scrutiny when warning signs appear. Think about this for a moment. How would you feel if you were part of an organization where abuse occurred and you later learned that multiple people had noticed warning signs but stayed silent because they didn't want to question someone important? How would you feel if you were the parent of a child who was abused in that setting, knowing that your trust in the institution's safeguards was misplaced? These are questions communities need to wrestle with honestly. The uncomfortable truth is that abuse often continues not because no one notices but because people notice and choose silence over action. They explain away their concerns. They trust reputations over instincts. They value community harmony over child safety. And children pay the price for those choices. Marcus tells communities that preventing abuse requires uncomfortable vigilance. It requires being willing to question people you respect. It requires prioritizing children's safety over adults' feelings. It requires accepting that someone can be generous, charismatic, helpful, and beloved while simultaneously being a predator. Those things are not mutually exclusive. In fact, being generous, charismatic, helpful, and beloved is often how predators operate successfully for so long. So what should communities do? What practical steps can organizations and families take to protect children? Marcus has developed a comprehensive prevention framework based on research and his own painful experience. Let's go through it. First, organizations that work with children must implement robust screening procedures. Every staff member and volunteer should undergo thorough background checks that include criminal history, past employment verification, and reference checks. But background checks alone aren't sufficient because many predators haven't been caught yet. Organizations also need to conduct behavioral interviews designed to identify concerning attitudes and approaches to working with children. They should ask scenario-based questions to assess how candidates think about boundaries, authority, and appropriate relationships with children. Red flags in interviews include candidates who seem overly eager for one-on-one time with children, who express views that children are more trustworthy than adults, who have poor boundaries in how they talk about children, or who have a history of moving frequently between similar positions, especially if they can't explain why clearly. Second, organizations need clear, written policies about adult-child interaction that everyone understands and follows. These policies should specify that one-on-one contact between adults and children should be minimized and, when necessary, should occur in observable settings with other adults nearby. Private, secluded interactions should be avoided. Policies should require 2 adults present for activities when possible, and when one adult is alone with the child, there should be windows or open doors so others can see. Physical contact should be limited to what's necessary and appropriate for the activity, such as helping a young child with a safety harness, with specific prohibitions against unnecessary touching or contact that could be misinterpreted. Policies should prohibit adults from communicating with children through private channels unless parents are included. Communications should happen through official, organization-monitored channels where possible. Adults should not have personal social media contact with children they work with. They should not be texting children privately or meeting them outside official activities without parental knowledge and involvement. If someone violates these policies, even if no abuse has occurred, there should be immediate consequences. Policies are worthless if they're not consistently enforced. Third, organizations must provide comprehensive training to all staff and volunteers about recognizing warning signs of grooming, understanding appropriate boundaries, knowing how to respond to concerning behavior, and understanding reporting responsibilities. Training shouldn't happen just once during onboarding. It should be ongoing, with regular refreshers and updates. Training should include specific examples of what appropriate and inappropriate behavior looks like so people understand the practical application. And training should create a culture where everyone understands they have a responsibility to speak up if they see something concerning, regardless of who is involved. Fourth, organizations need accessible, confidential reporting mechanisms that people can use without fear of retaliation. There should be clear procedures for how to report concerns, multiple channels for reporting including anonymous options if appropriate, and strong protections against retaliation for those who report in good faith. Reports must be taken seriously and investigated promptly by people who are trained to handle such matters appropriately. The organization should not investigate itself in serious cases, especially those involving senior leadership. External investigators may be necessary to ensure objectivity. Fifth, when reports are received, the organization's first priority must be child safety, not reputation management. The accused individual should be removed from contact with children immediately while the investigation proceeds. Parents should be informed promptly. Law enforcement should be contacted when appropriate, which is whenever there's potential criminal behavior. Organizations should not try to handle serious allegations internally as a way to avoid public attention. That approach has failed catastrophically in case after case. Sixth, organizations should conduct regular audits of their child protection practices, looking for gaps or weaknesses. They should seek input from child safety experts, parents, and even youth themselves about how safe the environment feels and where improvements could be made. Prevention is an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. Seventh, organizations need to create cultures of openness where concerns can be discussed without fear. If someone observes behavior that makes them uncomfortable, they should feel empowered to speak up, ask questions, or seek guidance without worrying they'll be seen as troublemakers. Leadership should model this openness by taking concerns seriously, thanking people for bringing issues to their attention, and demonstrating that child safety takes precedence over protecting individuals or institutional image. Now let's talk about what parents can do to protect their own children while also supporting community safety. Marcus has developed guidance for parents based on conversations with hundreds of families affected by abuse. First, know your child's world. Be involved in their activities, know the adults who work with them, show up unexpectedly sometimes, talk to your child regularly about what happens during their activities, and pay attention to how adults interact with your child and other children. Predators often behave differently when parents are present versus absent, so surprise visits can be revealing. Second, teach your child about body autonomy and appropriate boundaries from an early age using age-appropriate language. Help them understand that their body belongs to them, that they have the right to say no to physical contact even from trusted adults, that secrets about touching or gifts are not okay, that some body parts are private, and no one should ask to see them or touch them except in specific appropriate circumstances like doctor visits with you present, and that they should tell you immediately if anyone makes them uncomfortable, even if that person is someone they love and respect. Make sure your child knows they will never get in trouble for telling you something that made them uncomfortable, even if the adult told them it was a secret, or that they'd get in trouble. Predators use fear of consequences to silence children. You need to remove that fear. Third, establish open communication with your child where they feel safe talking to you about anything. Regular conversations about their day, their feelings, their friendships, and their activities create opportunities for them to disclose if something is wrong. Don't just ask if they had fun. Ask specific questions. Who did you talk to? What activities did you do? Did anything make you feel uncomfortable? How did the adults treat you and other kids? Listen carefully to not just what they say but what they don't say. If they avoid talking about someone or something, that might be significant. Fourth, trust your instincts as a parent. If something feels wrong about a person or situation, even if you can't articulate exactly why, trust that feeling. It's better to be overcautious and wrong than to ignore your instincts and have your child harmed. If an adult's interest in your child feels excessive or inappropriate, if someone pushes back when you try to be involved in your child's activities with them, if your child seems anxious or secretive around a particular adult, or if someone violates your family's boundaries repeatedly, those are reasons to step in and limit or end contact. You don't need absolute proof of wrongdoing to protect your child. Fifth, be cautious about allowing your child to have private, unsupervised time with adults outside your immediate family, even adults you trust and respect. Most abuse happens in isolated, one-on-one situations. When possible, ensure activities involving your child and other adults happen in group settings with multiple people present. If your child does spend time alone with another adult, make sure you know exactly where they are, what they're doing, and when they'll be back. Drop by unexpectedly sometimes. Trust, but verify. Sixth, monitor your child's electronic communications and online activity. Predators increasingly use technology to groom children. Know what apps your child uses, who they're communicating with, and what kind of content they're accessing. This isn't about invading privacy, it's about safety. Children don't have the maturity to navigate all online risks alone. You should have access to your child's devices and accounts, you should have conversations about online safety and appropriate communication, and you should use monitoring tools if appropriate for your child's age and maturity level. Be especially alert if an adult gives your child a device or encourages them to use apps or platforms you're not familiar with. That's a common grooming tactic. Seventh, teach your child the difference between healthy adult relationships and concerning ones. Healthy adults who work with children include parents in activities and decisions, respect family boundaries and schedules, treat all children with general kindness rather than singling out specific children for excessive attention, maintain appropriate physical and emotional boundaries, encourage children's independence and family connections, and are transparent about their interactions with children. Adults who show concerning behavior exclude parents from activities or communications, push against family boundaries and try to create private time with children, single out specific children for special treatment or excessive attention, engage in boundary violations like inappropriate touching or sexual conversations, try to create dependency or emotional intimacy that excludes family, and encourage secrecy or discourage children from telling parents about interactions. Help your child understand these differences so they can recognize when something isn't right, even if they can't explain why. Finally, if your child discloses abuse or concerning behavior, believe them and respond supportively. Research shows that children rarely lie about abuse. When they do disclose, they need to be believed and protected, not questioned or blamed. Your first response shapes whether they'll continue to confide in you or shut down. Thank them for telling you. Tell them it's not their fault. Tell them you'll keep them safe. Tell them you're proud of their courage in speaking up. Then take action. Report to appropriate authorities, which may include law enforcement, child protective services, or school officials depending on the situation. Remove your child from contact with the accused individual. Seek professional counseling to help your child process their experience. Document everything, including what your child told you, when they told you, and any evidence you have. And follow up to ensure the report is being taken seriously and investigated appropriately. Some parents worry that reporting will traumatize their child further or that they might be wrong and ruin someone's reputation. But the risk of not reporting is far greater. If abuse is occurring, your child needs intervention immediately. If it's not, a proper investigation will clear that up. Your job is to protect your child, not to protect adults' reputations. Now let's talk about community-level responsibility. Individual families can't prevent abuse alone. Communities must work together to create environments where children are protected collectively. Marcus encourages communities to organize regular education sessions about child safety and grooming prevention. Bring in experts to train parents, teachers, coaches, volunteers, and even age-appropriate education for children themselves about body safety and healthy relationships. Make this topic one that's discussed openly rather than avoided out of discomfort. Create community standards for organizations that work with children. Communities can establish expectations for what child protection policies should look like and hold organizations accountable for implementing them. Parents can collectively insist on transparency, proper screening, appropriate supervision, and clear reporting mechanisms. When communities unite around these standards, organizations are far more likely to comply. Develop community response plans for when abuse is disclosed. Too often, communities respond reactively and chaotically when abuse cases come to light. Having plans in place for supporting victims, communicating with families, cooperating with investigations, and implementing reforms helps ensure appropriate responses that prioritize healing and prevention of future harm. Support survivors publicly and visibly. When abuse cases become known, communities sometimes shame or blame victims while defending accused individuals, especially if those individuals are well respected. This response is devastating to survivors and discourages other victims from coming forward. Communities need to demonstrate clearly that they believe survivors, support their healing, and stand with them rather than protecting institutions or individuals at victims' expense. Hold institutions and individuals accountable when failures occur. If an organization failed to protect children, if leaders ignored warning signs, if policies were inadequate or unenforced, there must be consequences. Accountability isn't about punishment for its own sake. It's about demonstrating that child safety matters more than reputation, and creating incentives for organizations to take prevention seriously. Finally, communities must reject the idea that abuse only happens in certain places or is committed by certain types of people. The data is clear: abuse happens in every type of community, across all socioeconomic levels, in religious and secular settings, in wealthy and poor areas, involving people of every race, gender, and background. The only way to protect children is to recognize that predators can be anyone, and vigilance must be universal. Marcus often ends his presentations by telling the story of what happened in Riverside after Miss Eleanor's arrest and conviction. The community could have fallen apart in shame and denial. Instead, they chose transformation. They held community meetings to process what had happened and learn from it. They brought in experts to train teachers, coaches, youth leaders, and parents about recognizing and preventing abuse. They reformed their local organizations, implementing comprehensive child protection policies where none had existed before. They created support groups for survivors and their families. They developed a community culture where questioning concerning behavior was seen as responsible rather than paranoid. where protecting children took clear priority over protecting reputations, and where people understood that predators hide behind respectability. 5 years after Miss Eleanor's conviction, Riverside became a model for other communities. Their transformation attracted attention from researchers and prevention advocates who studied what they did right. Other communities facing similar situations reached out to learn from Riverside's experience. The town that had been devastated by abuse became a beacon of prevention and healing. Marcus tells communities, "What happened in Riverside can happen anywhere. But what Riverside did afterward, that can happen anywhere too. You have a choice. You can remain vulnerable, hoping abuse won't touch your community. Or you can take action now to create protections that make your community far less attractive to predators and far safer for children. The choice is yours." So now we turn to you watching this video. How are you feeling about what you've learned? Are you thinking about the children in your life and whether they're adequately protected? Are you thinking about your community and whether strong safeguards are in place? Are you feeling uncomfortable about certain relationships or behaviors you've observed but explained away? That discomfort is important. Don't dismiss it. Let's be specific here. Is there someone in your community who shows some of the warning signs we discussed? Someone whose interest in children feels excessive? Someone who seems to create opportunities for private time with kids? Someone who gives gifts or special treatment that makes you vaguely uncomfortable? Someone who discourages parental involvement or transparency? If you're thinking of someone right now, what are you going to do with that information? Are you going to explain it away because that person is respected? Are you going to stay silent because you don't want to cause problems? Or are you going to trust your instincts and take some action, even if it's uncomfortable? Remember, you don't need proof to ask questions, set boundaries, or remove your child from a situation. You don't need to accuse anyone of abuse to say, "I prefer that activities happen in group settings," or "I'd like to be more involved in my child's time with you," or "I'm going to decline that generous offer." Your child's safety is more important than anyone's feelings, including your own discomfort with seeming suspicious or ungrateful. And if you're part of an organization that works with children, are your current policies and practices adequate based on what you've learned today? Can you honestly say that your organization prioritizes child safety above reputation? That you have robust screening, clear policies, proper training, and a culture where concerns can be raised? If not, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to speak up at the next meeting? Are you going to volunteer to help develop better policies? Are you going to insist on changes even if leadership resists? The children in your organization are depending on adults to protect them. Will you be one of those adults? If you're a survivor watching this, first, we want you to know that we believe you. What happened to you was not your fault. The adult who abused you was responsible, not you. You deserve protection that you didn't receive, and that failure was not your fault. Second, we want you to know that healing is possible. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but thousands of survivors have found ways to process their trauma, reclaim their lives, and even use their experiences to help protect others. You're not alone, even though abuse often makes you feel isolated. There are therapists who specialize in trauma, support groups for survivors, hotlines you can call, and communities of people who understand what you've been through. Reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Third, if you're ready and able to do so, consider reporting what happened to you even if it was years ago. Many jurisdictions have extended or eliminated statutes of limitations for child sexual abuse. Your report could protect current children from the person who hurt you. It could also be part of your own healing process. But only you can decide if and when you're ready for that step. There's no right or wrong timeline. Finally, please know that your voice matters. When survivors speak their truth, it breaks the silence that protects predators. It encourages other survivors to come forward. It educates communities about the reality of abuse. It creates change. You have power, even though abuse tried to take it away. Marcus found his power in advocacy after losing Sarah and exposing Miss Eleanor. Countless other survivors have found theirs in different ways. Yours is valid too. For everyone watching, we want to leave you with this final thought. Child abuse thrives in silence, secrecy, and unchallenged trust. It dies in the light of awareness, accountability, and protective action. Every time someone speaks up instead of staying silent, every time a community implements strong protections instead of relying on trust alone, every time we prioritize children's safety over adults' comfort, we make abuse harder to perpetrate and easier to stop. The warning signs are clear. The patterns are well documented. The prevention strategies are proven. What's missing in too many communities is the will to implement them, the courage to question respected people, and the commitment to believe and protect children even when it's uncomfortable or costly. Miss Eleanor operated for decades because people chose silence over action, gratitude over suspicion, and reputation over safety. Hundreds of young men suffered because of those choices. Sarah lost her life because of them. But it didn't have to be that way. And it doesn't have to be that way in your community. You now have information that most people don't have. You understand how predators operate, what warning signs look like, how grooming works, and what prevention requires. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you share this video so others can learn these vital lessons? Will you start conversations in your community about strengthening child protection? Will you trust your instincts when something feels wrong? Will you speak up even when it's uncomfortable? Will you be the person who breaks the silence and prevents the next tragedy? We hope the answer is yes. We hope this video plants seeds that grow into action in communities everywhere. We hope that Marcus's painful journey and the hard-won lessons from Riverside and countless other communities facing similar situations help protect children who might otherwise be vulnerable. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring enough to learn. Thank you for being willing to have uncomfortable conversations and ask difficult questions. Please let us know in the comments what you think about this information, whether it changed how you view child safety in your community, and what actions you're planning to take. Share your thoughts about the warning signs. Share your location so we can see how far this message is spreading. And if this video opened your eyes or gave you tools you needed, please share it widely. The more people who understand these patterns, the harder it becomes for predators to operate successfully. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss our upcoming videos. We'll continue exploring important topics that affect communities and families. And remember, speaking up is not betrayal. Silence protects abusers. Your voice can save lives. Trust your instincts. Protect your children. Question respectfully but firmly when something feels wrong. Demand accountability from institutions. Believe survivors. Support healing. And never forget that those who seem too good to be true sometimes are. The most dangerous predators don't look like monsters. They look like the most helpful, generous, trustworthy people in your community. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. And most importantly, stay committed to putting children's safety above everything else. Thank you for watching. Stay safe.